Alrighty, we're going to try one more game. I've said it before, I'm kind of a bit on a losing streak, but I'm not worried about losing so much as I am about just playing good games. So I want to play good games today. Let's see if we can get a game in. See if my opponent is going to kick off the show. He's Chess Papito. All right, e4, e5, standard opening. Let's see where we go from here. A couple of knight moves developing. And Ruy Lopez is on the board. So this is why we've studied these games, right? This is why we study this line, is because we know we're going to see it quite a bit. So at our rating level, we know we're going to see the Ruy Lopez. So this is a setup that I've played in my last couple of games. And yes, I have lost last couple of games. But we're going to keep trying to improve our position each time. This is identical to the last game I just played. So I'm going to try to upload all three of these in a row. Bing, bang, boom. I'm ready to castle. If my opponent pushes down, I'm going to capture his pawn first. Okay. I would like to also do an h-pawn move. He pushes h3, which is okay because he's getting ready to castle. I would also like to push h6. I'm going to hold off right now because I don't need to. Aha. Okay, so this is new. This is something that I do not know what to do. All right. So if I push h6 or h7 now, excuse me, or h6 now is right the first time. If I push h6 now and my opponent continues down, I don't want to capture there. I would rather my opponent capture and then I capture back. If my opponent moves his pawn, his g pawn now, where does my knight go? Where does my knight go? Let's make a square for my knight. Let's do that. Let's make a square for the knight. Free up my light square bishop if my opponent were to move, for instance, an h pawn. I wonder if that's the setup he's going for. I wonder if he's walking his knight all the way over. Where else could this knight go? Realistically. My am I really going to mess up my pawn structure even more by chasing this? I don't know. All right, what if I were to put my knight up here on the d4 square? He only has it covered with his knight. So if he takes here, I take back with a pawn or a bishop. So I'm going to do that for now. I don't know what my opponent's up to. Notice I have not moved my rook to e8, or e8, so I don't have that spy. That can be a concern. I don't know where. I don't know which is the correct move here. I think with the pawn, that gives my opponent a chance to push down, but I can still push back. My queen is defended, so yeah, let's take with pawn. Just an even trade for now. I do have pressure on his knight. I don't... If he pushes his e-pawn and pressures my knight, see, I take his knight, he takes my knight. I take his... All right. Let's think this one through because I don't want to lose this particular knight just yet. And if he does, I can take with my queen, and I'm still okay. I have a threat here that he needs to handle. I don't have any way of trapping that bishop yet. My dark square bishop is a little ugly. I'm preparing this pawn move here. So if I push my d pawn and he captures, I want to be able to capture back at least. Notice he does have 2 attackers on it. Okay, that square is defended. So I can't take. My boy's got some serious pressure over here, and I am not prepared. I think my H pawn move has to come soon, even if we make this exchange here. Yeah. Actually, in this case, I probably should have gone all the way up. Oh boy, I am a little bit in trouble here, friends, aren't I? I feel like my queen has now become absolutely neutered. Absolutely 100% neutered. Notice if he takes with the bishop, I've got it defended. But I feel like I am in some serious trouble because this comes with check. Do I have any other way to block check? Not really. So this one got a little out of hand, and I feel like I've misplayed it somewhere. We're still even in material, so we're still even in material. Nobody's lost material yet. I'd like to get this. Yeah, I'd like to get this. He's got double pressure here that I have to be careful of. Notice now if he takes, I take back with a discover on his queen, which I'm okay with. Got my rooks connected, that's important. I'm thinking I'm going to move my F rook over to G, to G8 and put some pressure on this rook. Notice his rook is undefended, so that we put a little pressure on his side of the board. So he's looking for possibly a queen trade, but I would take it with my rook. Notice now, though, he has completely dropped the rook. Possibly. I possibly have convinced him to drop a rook. If he goes anywhere with his queen, I think I'm maybe I've wiggled out of this, guys. Let's take a look. Let's see if we've wiggled out of it. I'm looking around at the rest of the board, trying to see what else exists that could cause some serious concerns. Actually, how do we want to do this? If I go here, so we're up in material. We're now back in this. All right. Let's take a look at what we can do to start punching through here now. So I really want to take care of my opponent's pawn there and make sure we don't run into any issues with that. So first things first is let's get the queen back into the game somehow. I can't do anything here yet, but what if we punch through like this? We're up in material, so we're looking for trades. All right, where do we want to go here? Let's think this through. Let's think this through. I think puts me on a dark square, and I'm not happy about that. Let's do what we know. Let's do what we've talked about. We've talked about this fence, right? So this rook has a fence that is trying to cut us off. If I stay on this side of the fence, then that rook can just stay there and keep my king cut off in perpetuity. Whereas, let's stay this way, I guess. Probably should have gone the other way, but that's all right. Now my queen can come out and pick up this rook, or this pawn. I need to figure out a way to... Yeah, it would have been better to leave that pawn over here. All right, do we give back material? Let's see, how would that work? Do we give back material? He's got 2 defenders, and I've only got 1 attacker, so I can't take. He's going to take here, which is going to force me to... out of the way. All right, so this is getting a little shaky, but we're okay still. We're okay. We are okay. Get another defender on that pawn. This is a solid move for him. This is a very solid structure my opponent has here. It's going to be challenging for me to get through it. I could take here, allow my opponent to take back. I have a tactic. I could undouble my pawn by taking en passant. That gets my opponent's... does that help at all? I don't know. Or do I just take here and set up this structure? I think I'm going to take en passant. It undoubles, it keeps this. I now have a little bit of wiggle room. I can get back in here. Excellent. Is there any funky business? All right, let's think about this. My opponent puts a bishop on a g7. I take, queen takes rook, pawn takes queen, king takes bishop. So I'm trading my queen for his rook and bishop. I don't know if this is a good idea or not. Why did I do that? Why did they move it ahead of time? Why did I move it ahead of time? I was supposed to wait for him. I was supposed to wait for him. I was supposed to wait for him. Oh, dummy, dummy, dummy. I was supposed to wait for him. My goodness. So now I want to work this pawn. And the only thing my opponent has to stop it is this bishop. So I'm just getting squares covered. Trade. Pre-move. So I have 1 extra pawn, so yeah, it was a dumb mistake on my part. I got too deep into analyzing ahead of time. Just going to keep marching this pawn up, make sure my opponent can't get there. So he, so I can go past because I've got this pawn protecting it. I'm just going to keep my opponent's king. And just like that, I now have a barrier. My opponent can't pass. I have a passed pawn that is going to queen. He pretty much cannot stop it. And notice if he pushes past, that's perfect. All I have to do is keep all this tension here. As my opponent pushes down, I'm going to capture here. But I have a queen. My opponent's king, my king has created a wall that the opponent's king cannot pass. Now, that is only helpful if my opponent can't do anything else. The only thing he has now is this passed pawn, which is not a passed pawn, because all I have to do is capture here. So we keep marching our pawn to victory. I'm going to pre-move that because I know that that's going to happen. This comes with check. Now we're going to create a wall that my opponent's king cannot cross. I think that. My opponent has moves, but they are only, and I can just basically march my pawn up to victory at this point in time. I have time to do it, so there's literally nothing my opponent can do at this point in time. This queen prevents him from approaching. The king prevents him from approaching, so there's nothing he can do. He has squares, so he is not in. Ooh, that was a mistake, Joseph. That was a mistake. So let's cut him off again. That was a mistake on my part. That was a mistake. Notice he still can't take this. He can't come here, but he can go on this side. He can't go here. Perfect. He gave up. So now I've cut him off this way. He can still approach from this side, but he'll never be able to take this pawn because it's protected by my king. He can't approach this square, so this is a queen again. Now let's just make sure we don't accidentally put him in. This becomes a queen. I just don't want him to stalemate. This becomes a queen, so he's in check. So he has to move, and that's checkmate. So. All right, so we made some mistakes. We made some mistakes, and we dug ourselves out of it. So let's start from the beginning. This is the exact same opening. Oh, let me go to the analysis page. Sorry, guys. All right, the analysis page. This is the exact same game we've played a few times. The Morphy Defense Anderssen Variation. I probably need to look it up because now I have played this multiple times. I've now played this game probably 3-4 times in a row. So I probably need to study what the experts say. This is obviously not a great move. I don't know why I keep doing it, but I keep throwing it out there. So let's turn the engine off. What the heck, we'll leave it on. Castles. Yeah, I am not familiar with this at all. Let's go back here. Where is the first? Okay, so here. This move my opponent makes right here on move 7 makes this a brand new game that nobody's ever played before. All right, so from move 7 onward, we're in a brand new game. I didn't know what this was, honestly. I guess I could have seen that my opponent could have still castled queenside, and maybe I could have been prepared for this pawn storm, or, I could figure out what to do. I didn't know how to handle it. Okay, so I played d6. But the engine says it'd be better to go all the way up to d5. Why d5? Because, we got there eventually. I think we did that eventually, got this break in the middle. My opponent's king is still in the middle of the board, so that gives us a reason to break in the center. I could go for this outpost on d4 with my knight. That's an option, which I did get to that eventually as well, but... And then, so my 3 candidate moves that I did end up making these moves in the game, but not at the time. I think I wasted a move here. Yeah, I wasted a tempo here that didn't need to be done. Yeah, it says my opponent should just take and make this exchange. And then we put the outpost. Knights get exchange, and then it says, let's see what the engine says. Let the engine calculate real quick and see which way would have been better. So my thought process was go ahead and take with the pawn. I didn't have a good enough excuse either way, and maybe that meant I probably should have gone with the bishop because you can always retreat the bishop. So maybe taking the bishop is better, and it looks like it's about even. Either way, it's about even. So I took with the pawn. It says I should have gone for the exchange on that side of the board. And you know, hindsight, where my queen ended up being chased around. So, okay. So here's something I can learn. Let's stop and take a look. My opponent's king is in the center of the board. He does have the possibility to castle queenside, which means he does not need this structure anymore. Which means he's probably going to be attacking on this side of the board. That seems reasonable, doesn't it? I can go along with that logic, yeah. So if that's reasonable that he's attacking along this side of the board, then possibly parking my queen over here this early in the game might not be a valid tactic. So if that's the case, then I can go ahead and slide. I can go ahead and remove this knight and not have my. But then doesn't that leave this h7 pawn exposed? Like that, isn't that a weakness that we have to be careful not to drop? But I guess we can, barricade our pawns another way. Interesting. All right. So the engine says I should take. He'll take back. And then what? Oh, and then it says, yeah, just start breaking with pawns on the king side. Or, oof, look at that line. That's pretty. So move the queen all the way into aggressive move. This pawn can't go anywhere. These pawns are locked up. And then, okay, I'm seeing a tactic here now too. No, because he can take with the queen. Okay. Yeah, I was thinking if I have a tactic here where I take this pawn, notice he can't take back because then this rook is undefended. But that's not the case because he does have an extra defender on that pawn. Okay. So I chose not to make the exchange here. I chose to let the tension sit, and I chose to make my b5 push here, start driving this bishop away. The engine did not like that. It's almost a 2-point swing. Okay. Take with the queen. And I went c6. Wait, what did I do? Oh yeah, I went c6. Right. Because I went c6 because I was prepping d5. But I could have prepped d5 and moved my bishop at the same time. So okay, same idea, Joe. This is something that you can learn. Same idea. I'm trying to prep pushing d5 in order to make this break in the center, which I should have done a long time ago. Or I had the opportunity to do a long time ago. But now I'm making this prep here. I can do that two ways. I can either prep the pawn or I can push my bishop. And that pushing my bishop means I develop with tempo. So I could have done that. Push the pawn, lost a little bit of tempo. This is probably where shit goes sideways for me. Bring the queen back, Joe. Yeah, not as bad as I thought. Another point of advantage lost. And yes, so I said this in my head. I can't remember if I said it out loud or not. I should have pushed this h-pawn all the way to h5. Notice my opponent can take it en passant, so he can capture en passant. That would have ended up the exact same situation if I had just pushed it naturally and let him capture. However, if he doesn't capture, let's say I push h5, and my opponent doesn't capture en passant, it allows me to blockade his h-pawn. So if he doesn't capture it, then we have blockaded his h-pawn, and we're in a little bit better shape, possibly. Yeah, and so the engine says that's the engine says that's a major major mistake. Woo! Yeah. So taking on pushing the h-pawn and encouraging a take en passant would have left me in the same exact situation that I was counting on, but it did not give the opponent the chance to push this pawn. So, all right. By not pushing all the way up to h5, it allowed my opponent to push h5. gave my opponent the h5 square, which put my queen in jeopardy. Yeah, and the only really valid move here is the one that I made. And even then, it's still... There's still not a good defense either way. Okay, the engine says again, give my opponent, but then, yeah, because if he pushes there, I can take back. Okay, so another opportunity to push the G pawn to G5. See if my opponent wants to capture that en passant. But he doesn't have to, right? I'm just giving up material, right? Yeah, I don't like that line. I'm going to ignore that one. I'm going to ignore that. I went with the take there, so the engine says that was good. I looked at this line and I did not like it. Yeah, okay, so in reality, there's really only one move. These other two moves, these other two lines we can completely ignore because they just continue to go down the hole. The best option for me is the one that I made, so I feel good about that. My opponent played this extremely well. Like, they have a 10-point advantage almost at this point in time. Bishop e6. So I didn't go far enough. Why would I go bishop e6 and give up my bishop? Because then I've got a check? All right, I have to explore this line, guys. Sorry. This says bishop f5, and I went bishop e6. Bishop f5. Why can't my opponent just... I mean, take with anything. Oh, no, not that way, right? Take with anything. Because then a rook comes over. Opponent has to hide their king. And then I get a rook lift. Finally, I can get my queen out. Is that what it all boils down to? Oh, that was not a good move. Oh, put him in check. He blocks. Make the exchange. All right, at the end of that day, we got 2 rooks, 2 bishops, 1 bishop. So we're down a piece. I'm not sure. I'd have to explore that line a little bit longer, guys, before I understand it. I don't understand that line. Because at this point in time, we are even in material. My king is just way exposed. I wonder if maybe my opponent misplayed. Whoa, I misplayed. Checkmate in 2. There's nothing able to guard that square. My king has no moves, so I can only block and checkmate. Wow. So literally, I had to protect. I have to protect the f6 square. I have to protect the f6 square. Is the only way to prevent checkmate. And what if my opponent just takes with the queen? Oh, because then I can make the queen trade, and then I can wiggle out of checkmate because he doesn't have this move anymore. All right. So I did not notice that at all. I knew, man, I said over the board, I said this was dangerous. I was in a lot of trouble. I just didn't see what I didn't see how to get out of the danger. And I sure as heck didn't see that. There is a little button up here on Lead Chess, which, let me get rid of my circles. It shows the threat. So it says, if you don't take care of the threat, this is where we end up. So if we don't stop the threat, we're in checkmate in 2. This is an interesting button. You have to have the engine on when you do it, obviously. And so it can kind of show you that at a glance. I don't always use it, though, because sometimes I like to try to figure it out for myself. You see the way I kind of process through that. I don't always get there. I miss some things. I miss a ton of things, but every now and then you can click on that, turn that, show that threat on, and that's helpful. So the threat really is this queen to f6 is game over, man. Game over. Does pushing that help? Yes. No. Oh, yes, it does because it's protected. Okay. All All right, so I made a losing move here. My opponent missed that fact, thank goodness. They are going to be very angry at themselves. I've been there before, man. Been there before. Now, yep, my opponent can't go here. Okay, so then my opponent has to move, and that's where, yep, that's exactly what I said, was my opponent dropped material. Look at that swing. That's an 11, almost 12-point swing. So I did find that one, thank goodness. And there's really no, at this point in time, it just becomes cleanup mode. Which is better to take? I guess it doesn't really matter. 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. The only reason I took with my king was because I wanted to keep protecting this pawn so that his passed pawn wouldn't become a threat. Notice if I take with my queen, he can take here. I don't know if that's a major threat. Now it actually says that's losing for my opponent, but oh yeah, because I pick up a rook. But I did want to, like, over the board at the time, like that was my thought process, was I don't see a good reason one way or the other, so take with my king, and I can still keep my queen here protecting this. My opponent castled, which was definitely the correct move for them. Yeah. Getting the queen out. Taking this break in the center. Okay, so that wasn't too bad. It did allow my opponent a... Okay, yep. And okay, so here's another deciding point. What's the deciding factor here? Take with the D pawn, or take with the D5 pawn, take with the B pawn, or take en passant. And of the three, I chose the weakest one. I chose the weakest one by far. Yeah, see, if I had just taken here, that puts all my pawns connected. Once I push up a little bit, it connects all my pawns. Now he can still take back and disrupt that, but then I take back, and I've got 3 pawns right in the center of the board. All right. Whereas taking en passant for me allowed his bishop to kind of get back into the game. And then, yeah, this is the threat I was looking at, was if I moved my bishop out of the way, right? So I was considering moving my bishop up to get it into the game. And the threat I was worried about was this threat here. Because that does mean I have to give back material, right? Otherwise, this pawn is seriously falling, but also my opponent's got... my opponent can start moving their rook as well. Right now, their rook is tied to this pawn, and this bishop gives them a little bit of wiggle room to start moving their rook as well. All right, that being said, this is what I was worried about, and the engine agrees with me that I could take here. He takes, I take the bishop, and I've still got his pawn blockaded. Yes, I have to be careful that pawn doesn't become an issue, right? But as soon as I grab it, I'm okay. So yeah, this is the threat I was worried about. And in my thought process, I just grabbed it. Look at it. This is another major swing in my opponent's favor. So I'm up 8 points. I'm only up 2.5. Yeah, that was dumb. Because the other line, I would end that bishop at the end of the day, and I'd still be up 8 points of material. That was dumb. But over the board, man, over the board, the adrenaline and all those kind of things, you're thinking them through, and my brain does not work the way that I can store all these things in a logical sequence. I just, it's like the ADD of chess, man. You see something, you just plop it out. Yeah, that was a decent bishop move. Bishop. Okay, yeah, it wanted me to go ahead and put it along this, I don't know what you call this diagonal, this B2 diagonal, B8, H2 diagonal. Because that's what protects this, can get my pawn all the way to the protected square. I wanted to put pressure here first. And then I got it to that same. Okay, so I ended up getting there anyway. And yes, I was debating on moving away. which I guess is not as bad. Yeah, I was debating on both those moves. So both those moves are solid, so I'm good with either way. The engine wants me to take here, and I chose not to. But yeah, either way, making that trade is way good for me. Okay, now this is an in-game tactic. Okay, so in-game tactic, the king, because the king can move in any direction, right? So the wall around the king is what protects. Like the king can protect himself. So when you've got two kings that are fighting over space, these three in between are key squares. Whoever their king controls those three squares. So you got to figure out which squares you don't want the enemy king to be and control them. Now, what I don't want right now, the only thing that can stop this pawn is my opponent's king. I do not want my opponent's king getting to this square. If my opponent's king gets to either of these two squares, my pawn cannot promote. So I need to control. This wall. Now my opponent's king can still march here, but I can move here. And yes, that causes issues for my opponent. Now this pawn is blockaded. Right? This pawn is blockaded, and I'm kind of, oh no, I'm in trouble. Oops, no, not that one. Don't do that. You want to give yourself some space. There is a tactic in order to... we'll look at this in the end game. There's a tactic on how to get your king around without letting the opponent. Notice if I were to... first off, my opponent's king is controlling these squares. So my king cannot move. If I push my pawn down, my king will never, this pawn will never queen. So this king is controlling these three squares. The only way for my king to escape is to come up this way. So I would have to move my king here. Now my opponent has a move here. So now I'm controlling these squares. My opponent is controlling these squares. How do I now get my pawn? Well, I move here. My opponent has to make a move. That's fine. Not the right one? Yeah. My opponent has to make a move. And now notice, I'm controlling these three squares. My pawn is about to control that square. So my opponent, king, has to move. Now he can hide it here. That's fine. At some point in time, he's going to have to move. Now, this is how you can end up in stalemate, is you have to be careful. This is controlling this square. Oops, undo that. Delete. So let's say I take his pawn. Oh no, I don't want to take that pawn because then I lose this pawn. So yeah, I'm just gonna keep wiggling back and forth as well, keeping an eye on that pawn. But there are other things that can move. At some point in time, there won't be other things that can move. My opponent has stalemated the game. So these are tactics that we have to be careful of. Let's undo all this, delete all that. So I need to make sure my opponent does not get to these squares. My opponent should move here. That should be his move. Right? God, I got to go study this again, guys. I got to go study this again. Yeah, push my pawn. That's what I did. Wait, hang on. So yeah, in the game, he pushed another. Yeah, this is where he made a mistake. Is pushing something else allowed me to get here. And this is entirely what creates a barrier. My opponent's king cannot approach my pawn. And if he moves, I just move with him. I keep this wall in between us at all times. If he moves, I move. If you move, I move, just like that. If you move, I move, just like that. And I keep that wall in between us at all times. This way, this pawn is free to queen at any time. And it's just a matter of just pushing it whenever. So my opponent can move his king around, but he will never be able to get over and back to try to chase down my pawn, because wherever he moves, I'm going to move. It's called opposition. Kings are opposite of each other. Whoever has opposition has control. So my opponent is going to get out of opposition. I'm going to put him back in opposition. My opponent gets out of opposition. I'm going to put him back in opposition. So that way, there's no way he can approach. Now, at some point in time, right, I'm going to have to move my pawn, but that's okay. That's what I've always got it in reserve, right? It's going to move up. So my opponent tries to move out of the way. He tries to come up here. Actually, in this case, that's fine because I'm controlling these squares too. So you can try to get behind it, but it's too late, right? I'm controlling all these squares. Now, I do have to watch out for this, but I've got it blockaded. So, end games where you get down to just kings, remember the king is the only thing that can protect, and the thing is the only thing that can attack. And so build a wall in between your opponent's king. So a little rambly here at the end as we talk about king moves, but just know that that wall is important. At this point in time, I know that I have a queen. All I have to do is make sure my opponent doesn't get a queen, and all these others are blockaded, so I'm safe. Now, once my opponent's king starts marching over to start attacking my pawns, I really want to make sure I have a queen or something that can move faster than my opponent's king. And yeah, at this point in time, Yeah, and I made a little bit of a mistake here, right? I allowed my opponent to sneak back in a little bit, give him an escape square. So all I had to do here was move my queen. Yeah, all I had to do is move my queen. Actually, yeah, there would have been a great square. Notice he has to move away. And so that leaves me free to move. And with a queen, he can never reapproach. So that gives me this whole barrier. And now I've cut my opponent's king off as well. So I should have made a slight change in my moveset. You totally can checkmate someone with just a king and a queen. Like, it's totally possible. Essentially, what you do is you use your queen to cut the king off, and then use that wall of your king to slowly advance your king to trap your opponent in a corner, and then use the queen. Your king then defends your queen, which is delivering checkmate. So if that makes sense at all. So the last like 10 minutes of this recording have been me just rambling about king moves. But that's part of the end games that we have to learn, is how to use your king as a weapon. And notice here, like, I didn't panic. I just cut my opponent's king off. Like, that's all I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to, at this point in time, I'm not trying to deliver checkmate. I'm just cutting him off so that I have time to figure things out. So just cut him off, right? We're not going to try to chase him around or anything like that. Or even if I were to move here, that allows my opponent's king to start escaping. Actually, no, it doesn't. I've got that covered. I got that covered. So yeah, I guess it wasn't nearly as panic mode as I was worried about. But either way, just keep your opponent's king cut off. Don't let him approach. Don't let him jump over walls. That's it. It was a fun game. I am going to go back and I'm going to pull up some notes on this Morphy Defense Anderssen Variation, because I am starting to play this quite a bit. Where my opponent plays a Ruy Lopez, I play a pawn push, and I'll have a look. Maybe it's better for me just to go for the full Morphy Defense. I don't know. But I'm starting to like this a little bit, and I want to explore what the experts say on it. So I'm going to look up this Anderssen Variation and see what it says. Alrighty, guys. I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.